Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, where we're continuing on the book 9, looking today at chapter 10. We're still getting used to the changes in my recording program. There's been changes and it's been screwing up, and we're just trying to work with it. Today, chapter 10 is going up right to it. Let's go right into it, right? Starting down below, and we'll just do it. It's just going to be short. One must then make as many friends, must one then make as many friends as possible? Or, just as it seems to have been said appropriately concerning hospitality, to be a host neither to many or to none. This is a footnote uh, 29 to work. Hesiod's classic works in days. And he starts, you know, maybe someone there should, maybe you should do works in days. This is one of those great book poems of the Greek's world. Um, Works and days do the line here that therefore you should be like friends. The number of friends in hospitality should be the same. It's this middling moment between not many hosts, neither to a many guests or to none, right? There should be a limit. They're saying should it be as friend as possible, or should you follow this limit, right? It will be fitting in the case of friendship too, neither to be a friend, nor to turn out to have excessive many friends. Neither to be without a friend, nor in turn to have excessively many friends. In other words, this idea what is this case of this limit of friends in that sense? Is there a limit? In fact, there's a famous thing that in reality you can only be how many people we can actually know. This is the studies of psychology that we can basically know about 110 to 150, 110 to 150 people we can really have knowledge of. So, in other words, there's in the human brain, the science, neuroscience has taught us that our brain can only functionally know people completely, limits to how many people we can know. And therefore, the question here is that there's limits to things. The human things always have limits in this sense. It cannot be ad infinitum. This is why those of us who have like thousands of Facebook friends, really, they're not friends. They're people we have know about or like or want associate with us in some tangential way, but they're not friends in that sense, right? Some are, but some will not be, right? Because it's a question of how they're doing it. And the question of the internet, these relationships that are tangential or virtual, to what degree are they real in that sense? This is the new question that is going to be binding us in our new as technology starts shaping our lives and our experiences. How technology will alter our conceptions. But I don't think we should, because we're biological beings, and as long as we remain biological beings, we're going to have limits towards our physicality, and our actuality in space and time are going to limit us in certain things. So let's turn to this. The question of how should we in other words, it's fitting that in case of friendship too, that neither to be without friends, but not to have too many, right? Is this really the issue, right? This is a question in that sense. In the case of those who are friends with a view to the useful, the point stated would be fitting indeed. In other words, if it's about the useful, people who are friendships based on utility, this point should be. This is very fitting. For it is laborious to serve many in return. And in fact, a lifetime is not sufficient for doing so. In other words, if it's about utility, it's about doing good, it's about benefiting, giving benefit to others, useful, what is beneficial, giving to others, and to helping them and getting it. This will be a limit. And it is laborious to serve many in return. And in fact, a lifetime is not sufficient for doing so. Having more friends than is sufficient for one's own life, accordingly, is superfluous and implement and an impediment to living beautifully. In other words, this is kind of in other words, friends based on utility. There's a moment when you have two. If you remember, utility is this: I give you, I help you, you help me. So economics, hey libertarians, there's a limit to utility. You know that, don't you? Don't. So if your idea of human society is basically just human utility relationships, well, there's a point where all of a sudden you get too many of them, then life becomes not pleasant, not noble, not wonderful. In other words, accordingly, is superfluous, too much, too much excess, and an impediment, something that blocks you from living beautifully, living well. In other words, you want to live well. You don't want to live like being very wealthy, having all these friends and people, associates, and doing lots of stuff, working all the time, working all this stuff, working hard and working. You don't get to live beautifully. You don't get to live well, nobly, well. It becomes an impediment. There is no need of them, therefore, these useful people in that sense. There's a certain time, there's no need of them. And with a view to pleasure too. So therefore, not only this is the question for the useful, but also the pleasant. Why? A few friends are enough. Just as with seasoning in food. Like, too much seasoning in food makes it miserable. Like the friends of pleasure, just the few friends that give you great pleasure, is all you need. Having all these friends with all this pleasure becomes so excessive and superfluous that it kind of prevents you from living well. In other words, think of all these internet influencers with millions of friends and how base they are. By base, not in this, I don't mean base in that, this alt right meaning, or this kind of like, I mean, they really have an understanding against the political, no, but I mean base is they are living pathetic, shallow, banal lives in this sense. So let's continue. But one ought to make friends with the greatest number of serious human beings, Buddhas, or is there some measure here too of the quantity conducive to friends, just as there is in the city? In other words, the city can only be so size. In other words, should we make as many? So maybe the question. Okay, there's limits. There's real limits to the question of friends of pleasure and friends of utility. But what about friends of serious people, Spudaios, the serious people, those who have good character and good things? Is there a measure here? Should we get as much as possible, or is there a limit here too? As in the question of the city, right? He says, the example is, for a city could not come into being from 10 human beings, yet there are 10 times 10,000. It is no longer a city either. In other words, 10 times 10,000. So that's super city, big city is too big. It's too big. So for most modern cities are basically money. These cities of 100, 100,000, 10 times 10,000, right? 10 times 10,000 is 100,000. So 100,000, many cities, millions of people. So it's hundreds of cities. It's not one city. It's, from the Greek point of view, it's hundreds of cities. Why is 10,000 seems to be a kind of a, and it gets above 10,000, it's too big in that sense. 100,000. It is just simply just not, you don't know each other, you don't know people, right? It's 10,000. It's no longer a city either. The quantity in question is perhaps not some single number, but anything between a certain limit. So it's not a specific number, the question, both of the city and that. but a certain limit of how many people can live in life together, that you can live knowingly. The question for the city is that living the life, the common life together and living well and beautifully. Whereas for the individual number of friends, the same question, but in a more specific sense, right? Accordingly, the number of friends too is limited, and perhaps the greatest number someone would be able to live together with. For living together seemed to be the most conductive of friendships. So therefore, how many you could live together, how many people you could live with and interact with and share a life together with. That it is impossible to live together with many people and to distribute oneself among them is not unclear. In other words, it's obvious in that sense. The statement "not unclear" means it's obvious, right? It's Greek seems to say it the negative. We want to say it the positive. It's obvious that you can't. It's hard to live together with lots of people. It's going to be not well. It's impossible to live together with many people and to distribute oneself among them equally, fairly. Further, one's friends ought to be friends with one another, if all are going to spend their days with one another. But if it is a task, but if it is a task for this to happen among numerous people, in other words, they're not going to be able to be all friends with each other. In other words, you need to have everyone being friends with everyone. And if it's too big, you're not going to. You have some people who don't really want to be friends with these people. So there's going to be not complete friends with friends. The real friends, the networks of friends are all friends with each other. That's going to be that globe of everyone is a friend with every other one. And there's going to be reciprocity in the friendship. But if it grows too big, that ability to get that reciprocity. And I think this also explains why someone like in the modern idea, we have the problem of why the common good, why achieving a majority, this kind of thing in larger scale networks is not possible, and that you shouldn't try, right? That this is why the idea we want these larger scale things. We want these larger scale networks for the sake of their utility they give, the benefit they give. Therefore, we should abandon this idea of friendship because you can't do it at that level. Therefore, by privileging this, in other words, the idea is the utility of this low level utility brings so much good and benefit for more people, right? This utilitarian conception of benefit for more outlies just this more intense benefit. In other words, this really higher benefit in that sense. No, that's because not everyone can enjoy that. Only a few people can enjoy that. So that seems not fair. Whereas the other kind of this lower pleasure, this lower thing, this utility, more people can benefit from. So this is the modern bias in that sense, with this idea that the good that most people can get should have it in that sense, right? So further, one's friends ought to be friends with one another, if are going to spend their days with one another. But this is a task for this is a task, but it is a task for this difficult thing, for this to happen among numerous people. It is also difficult for many to share intimately both joys and suffering. If it is likely to happen if one shares simultaneously the pleasures of one person and the griefs of another. In other words, it's difficult for many to share intimately both the joys and the suffering. If we're going to have the friend needs to be able to what? And share simultaneously the pleasures of one person with the grief of another, right? But this is going to be hard to kind of all do this in that sense. Perhaps Perhaps then it is good not to seek to have many friends as possible, but only as many as are sufficient with a view to living together. For it would seem that it is not even possible to have an intense friendship with many. In other words, if you want to have this complete total friendship, you can't have with many. There's going to be a limit. There's going to be a Pareto limit to this of what can possibly happen of this kind of friend. So maybe it's not good to get with many, but rather take the, what is it, to be as sufficient, but only as many as are sufficient to living together and living beautifully together in that sense, right? Um, Hence, in fact, it is also not possible to be passionately in love with them, with more than one person, since this love tends to be a certain extreme of friendship and is directed at that one person. Now, here is that is the word to love. This is the erotically. This in love with, to be eros, desire, erotic desire, in love with, erotically. That is to love erotically. Eron here, and that therefore this is a peak, an extreme. See note 10 above in that sense of the earlier notes, right? You go over here, go, no, no, 10 up here. Let's go look at it all the way up here to 10. See this idea of peak, right? The peak is the hyperbole, whereas it is in rendering excess, right? So all the way back, all the way note 10, right? Let's go back here. Okay, that's 12. Uh, so extreme friendship that is directed towards one person, right? So therefore, it's not possible to be in love with many people. So you can make more than one person. It's very difficult. This idea is, oh, people love two people. No, you know, it's going to be very difficult to intensely love two more people. This is why people say that, oh, you love two people. That's going to be like, no, we don't believe that. I'm sorry, you don't believe them. You don't really love them equally. You love one more than the other one, really. Um, or you love them differently in that sense. They love something about them differently. One gives you pleasure, one gives you benefit, or one gives you pleasure of a certain way. And in other words, you can't love each other, someone in that radical sense, intensely. There's a limit to this. Intense friendships, so therefore, it tends to be an extreme of friendship and directed to that person. It's love in that sense. Intense friendship, accordingly, is only with a few people. In other words, there's a limit. There's a limiting in friendship. Intense of friendships are going to this complete and total friendship is going to be a limited thing. It's not going to be with many in that sense. Um, Only with a few people. This also seems to be what is actually done. Many do not become friends in the manner of close comrades, and friendships of that sort, celebrated in hymns, are spoken of in terms of pairs, like the small noun person like this. But those who have many friends and who fall in with everyone are as familiars, seem to be friends with no one, except as fellow citizens. And people, in fact, call these friends obsequious. So therefore, this is like accept as fellow citizens. In other words, they're friends with, but those who have many friends and who fall in with everyone as familiar seem to be friends with no one really. They're friendly. They're affable. They're friendly, but not really friendly towards one specific person, right? Now, obsequious. They call them obsequious, except as their fellow citizens, right? This is the kind of fellowship of fellow citizens in that sense, that they see themselves in that, okay, I recognize you. I recognize you as a fellow, and I'm going to be affable towards you, obsequious. Now, as fellow citizens, it is possible to be friends to many without being obsequious. But as a truly decent person, in other words, that as a citizen, as a fellow citizen, as a friend, as a fellow citizen, you can be that, but it's not obsequious. Obsequious is it's only being affable towards them. It's being affable. It's okay. This is why the word obsequious is being used here. Um, Hold on, let me. Yeah, I mean, it means to be fawning. Obsequious, kind of fawning over. Well, it's like, oh yeah, hi there, yeah, fawning over them. These people who are like, oh, I like you, oh yeah, fawning. fawning, to be servile. Oh, let me help you like this. Servile in that sense. Fawning over someone. Servile. Servicing. You can now, this, if you have too many friends who are servicing, this is why they kind of look at them as, you're not really, there's something, I would say affable. This is the problem of affability, but then it's a kind of excessive affability in that sense, right? But as fellow citizens, you can be a friend to many without being this fawning. Therefore, it is the best kind of situation. In other words, friends. This is why comrades and friends are few, but you can get what is citizenship, being a fellow citizen, a fellow sharer of a community, the community together. But then again, even this is limited by those who are within the community, who share in your political community, who share in the city you live in that sense, the political koinonia that you live in together, that you are citizens of, that you are fellow sharers of your fatherland with, your country, your patria in that sense, right? So, okay. Now, a fellow citizen is possible to be friends with many without being obsequious, but as a truly decent person, but as still decent, you're not going to be obsequious, but as a decent person, you can be friends with your fellow citizens in that sense. Yet it is not possible to be friends to many if the friendship is based on virtue and on what people and what the people involved are in themselves. In other words, that you can't be the friendship cannot be based on virtue. The virtue cannot have virtue everyone. You can have this huge number of friends based on virtue or on what people are involved in them are in themselves. And it is desirable enough to find even a few people of this sort, this good character, those of the character that you are able to live well together. So therefore, it's you don't need to have this success. There's a parade. In other words, there's a fundamental limit and Pareto limit to this. Well, so we'll stop here, and then you have any comments or questions, please put them below, and I'll respond to them when I see them. Please hit like button, help it, share it far and wide, share the video far and wide to your friends. A thumb, it helps the video. If you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Encourage friends to subscribe. Bring them to the channel. Watch either the Aristotle's ethics stuff or the other stuff on the different playlists that we've covered so far in the channel's history. In other words, if you've not liked it, say thumbs down, but say why in the comments so people can benefit. Next, least but not least, if you want to follow me on social media, the social media links below. If you want to know more about me as a scholar and check out my research and things like that, you can go below the social media link. There's the academic social media links, which directs you to those social media sites, academic social media sites that host my scholarship. And then last but not least, if you want to financially help what I do here, because again, this is expensive and I'm not monetized yet in YouTube, so I can't. I'm not going to be monetized. I just want a tip, Josh, so someone could give me $1 once in a while. It would be nice that if someone did that, but people, we'll teach philosophy for a change. But you can do so through Patreon or Subscribestar. Please, it helps. Every little bit helps. Or you can buy one of my books. They're listed below in the links, either through your local bookstore, on Amazon online, or Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any online distributor, or through the publishers themselves. Well, that's it. Next time we look at chapter 11. Take care. The penultimate chapter of this book 9 on friendship. Take care. Bye bye.